The Marvel and DC universes are incredible because of their rich worlds that have been developed over decades, but at the same time, they're intimidating to new fans because they're under the impression that they need to read thousands of old comic books to understand what's going on in any given story. But what if I told you that there is a brand new superhero universe that's not only easy to jump into, but is already putting out comics that are just as good, if not better, than what Marvel and DC are bringing to the table? This is the Massiveverse, an indie comic phenomenon that mashes up everything great about American superheroes with the bombastic storytelling of Japanese tokusatsu like Power Rangers and Kamen Rider. This video is going to be diving into everything, so when they inevitably get animated series that are on par with Invincible, you'll get to say that you knew about them first. Hello and welcome to Comic Drake, where I talk about comic books and my name is Drake. Let's talk about it. If you want to read any of the comics that I feature in this video, then go to your local comic shop. But if you want to read them digitally, then I highly recommend the sponsor of today's video, GlobalComix. They are legitimately my favorite digital comics platform, and they basically have it all. Massiveverse, Batman, Invincible, Sonic, Scott Pilgrim, Hellboy, Ninja Turtles, and tens of thousands of other comics. This is your one-stop shop for some of the best books in the industry. But the biggest thing that I love is that they put the creators first, with your subscription dollars getting paid out to writers and artists based on what you are actually reading. GlobalComix is affordable, easy to access, and convenient. Plus, there is a ton of free content being released every single week, so even if you're on a tight budget, you can still enjoy the medium that we all love. Again, GlobalComix is genuinely my favorite digital comics platform, and it is continuing to get better every single day. So if you want to read any of the comics that I feature in this video for yourself, along with literally tens of thousands of others, then click the link in the description and use my code to get 33% off your first yearly subscription. Once again, big thank you to GlobalComix for sponsoring the video, but now, let's get back to it. After a successful run on the Nightwing comic for the New 52 initiative, Kyle Higgins rose to comic book stardom through his groundbreaking work on the Power Rangers comic at Boom Studios, by specifically aiming the book at young adults. This series kicked so much ass, because not only did it have spectacular fights, but it grounded the story by focusing on Tommy, the Green Ranger, who had recently broken away from the mind control of Rita Repulsa and joined the Rangers, with the comic heavily focusing on Tommy's struggle of finding his place in the world and his guilt of having been evil. These comics culminated in the iconic Shattered Grid storyline, a crisis-level event where the world was taken over by Lord Drakkon, an evil alternate universe version of Tommy who had never found redemption. However, Drakkon wasn't planning on stopping there. He was going to take over the entire multiverse and become God. So this meant that every single Ranger from across the franchise's history had to come together to oppose him. I love this page of every Ranger teleporting in, creating a meteor shower of red, blue, yellow, pink, green, black, and white, and the fight scenes are so sick, with entire Megazords fusing together to create Mega Megazords. After the success of Shattered Grid, Kyle Higgins became the comic industry's go-to guy for all things tokusatsu, from Marvel's Ultraman comic to DC's Immortal Legend Batman. But in 2021, Kyle shook the comic book scene with a brand new title that took everything that he learned from his time of working on Power Rangers and created the most popular new superhero of the decade, Radiant Black. This book is all about childhood friends Nathan and Marshall. Nathan is a writer who moved back home to Chicago after failing to make it big in LA and racked up a ton of debt in the process. Marshall, on the other hand, is a pop culture fanatic that never found his calling, opting to work at a video store and try out the occasional entrepreneurial scheme like selling bath bombs. After a night out on the town, the two came across a mysterious entity called a Radiant, which turns Nathan into a full-on superhero complete with a super suit and a whole slew of powers like gravity manipulation. However, this doesn't make Nathan an instant badass. He's still trying to put his life back together, and just when it seems like he's starting to get the hang of things, he's gone. You see, like any good Sentai squad, there are more color-coded Radiants out there, each with their own special powers and abilities, but not all of them play nice. Like Radiant Red, who uses her matter absorption ability to rob banks in order to pay off her husband's gambling debts, with one of their clashes with Radiant Black getting so intense that it puts Nathan into a coma, leading to Marshall to take up the Black Radiant and fill in as the main character. This sudden narrative shift could have easily backfired, with Marshall's wisecracking demeanor being completely different from Nathan, and there was a huge chance that readers would hate this sudden change in tone and direction. But Marshall is a natural at the superhero gig, and he even takes this opportunity to merchandise the Radiant Black brand by leveraging his newfound fame to finally sell all those bath bombs that were cluttering his house. I mean, hell, even I bought one, because yes, I got my hands on one of these official Radiant Black bath bombs. All right, bombs away.
Whoa.
All right, just got out of the bath, and that was delightful. It was bay leaf and tobacco scented. The comic said that if I wanted to, I could watch the movie What Lies Beneath while soaking in the tub, and I did. It was fine. Nothing too special, honestly. Marshall's recommendations are not the best. What makes Marshall such a compelling lead is how his guilt of taking over as Radiant Black builds while Nathan is in the hospital. Despite how much he loves being a hero and getting the recognition that he always felt like he deserved, Marshall knows that the Black Radiant doesn't belong to him, and that he's only wielding it at the expense of his best friend in the whole world. There's a gut-wrenching scene where Marshall is sucked into an extra-dimensional realm and has his soul laid bare in front of him. He's trapped in this endless void until he admits to himself that he has lingering resentment for Nathan moving to LA and seemingly throwing away their friendship for something bigger and better. But on top of that, Marshall has to come to terms with how he feels like his entire existence has amounted to nothing. I was seriously skeptical at first when Marshall took over as the main character, but this scene spoke to me, and it cemented my love for this book. Sure, the trippy visuals were a delight to take in, but there is so much heart in this comic, and it is obvious that Kyle Higgins is putting a lot of himself into it.
The book's not about me, but there's a lot of me in the book, and there's a lot of me in Nathan, there's a lot of me in Marshall, or different aspects of me, I guess. And it was a little surreal watching people argue about which character sucked and which character was better. Sure. And to not take it personally or as any sort of judgment on aspects of myself was, totally the normal, healthy thing that I did.
Yes, readers initially come to Radiant Black for kick-ass, high-octane fights, but they stick around for the emotional core, tackling themes of imposter syndrome, the stresses of trying to pursue a career in the arts, and the melancholy that comes with trying to find your place in the world. But I also have to give credit where it's due, because as much as the storytelling of Radiant Black is great, the art totally sells it. Marcelo Costa is the main artist on the series, and he's able to dynamically pose these characters brilliantly, and I especially love when the visuals get creative. Like, take a look at this villain named Doppler who can weaponize sound, and how she turns a simple triangle into an anime super move. Clearly though, the secret sauce is in the vivid colors, because god damn they make this art pop. But what's also great is how the creators are constantly trying to push the boundaries of the comic book medium itself. Like, Radiant Yellow's origin issue visualizes his future vision by telling 4 different stories at 4 different points in time, all at the same time. And then they decided to be absolute mad lads by releasing the Infinite edition of this issue, which is all printed onto one large continuous spread. It's insane. Although the other Radiant wielders do get solo issues within Black, there's a couple of miniseries that give the characters more depth, not just padding out the world, but deepening the emotional stakes and showing off this world through different genres of storytelling altogether. Radiant Red, written by Cherish Chen and illustrated by David LaFonte, is a grounded story that follows Red as she tries to get away from her newfound life of crime and the strain that it's putting on her marriage. But she's blackmailed by a criminal organization into working for them under the threat of being exposed. On the complete opposite end of the tonal spectrum, though, is Radiant Pink, written by Melissa Flores and Megan Camarena, and is illustrated by Emma Kubert. It's a chaotic girly pop rom-com, as the hero by day, streamer by night Pink has her portal powers go awry, which strands her in space with a villain. Hijinks ensue, including a giant alien cat named Kitty Kitty from Catnip 4, who flies around in a cat-shaped spaceship, and there's a toxic whirlwind romance brewing between Pink and the villain. Honestly though, I just wish that Radiant Yellow got his own miniseries, because that 4-timeline issue was so damn compelling. Not to mention that his power of being able to see multiple futures leads to brilliant payoffs. Like this scene where he randomly has a whoopee cushion, but later in that issue when Nathan is about to be killed, Yellow had strategically placed it in just the right spot in the middle of battle, saving Nathan's life. Yellow's future vision feels like controlled chaos, and a tightly written solo book that's packed with interweaving timelines and seemingly tiny details that come together into a perfect payoff could be comic book gold, which makes sense considering that gold is, yellow. That's such a dumb joke. Showing off these different tones and genre blends is the magic of the Massiveverse. And speaking of magic, the Massiveverse is not afraid to dip its toes into the mystical side of things, providing a completely different vibe from the sci-fi antics of Radiant Black. This is Rogue Sun, written by Ryan Parrott, who took over the main Power Rangers book when Kyle Higgins finished Shattered Grid. Meet Dylan. He's a teenage delinquent who was blindsided to discover that his estranged father, who walked out on him and his mother when he was born, was actually the superhero protector of New Orleans, Rogue Sun. He was the last line of defense against the vampires, the demons, and the forces of darkness, but he was killed in combat, and despite the two of them having never talked, Dylan's dad left him the source of his power, the Sunstone. You see, the title's a pun because Dylan is a rogue son. But here's the hook. Because Dylan's dad died while he was wearing the suit, his soul is bonded to it, which means that he's mentoring Dylan to solve his own murder. Think of the dynamic kind of like Batman Beyond, but magic. Now, Dylan wants nothing to do with his asshole father, especially after finding out that the dude set up a whole new life for himself and had 2 other kids, both of whom were pissed because they assumed that they would be the ones to inherit the rogue son legacy. And that's the question, isn't it? Why leave the Sunstone to Dylan? Well, it turns out that it's not because his dad believed in him or he was trying to build the relationship they never had. No, he did it specifically because the next rogue son would likely be in serious danger. So in order to protect the kids that he actually loves, Dylan was made the heir to the Sunstone. He's a terrible dad, but damn, that is an amazing premise. Dylan is out to prove that he can be a better rogue son than his father ever was, and fights off bizarre creatures with unique designs and abilities that are all working for the big bad Morningstar, who feeds on grief and desperation, granting powers to those that are willing to sell their souls to work for him as his eternal servants. You can tell that Abel, the artist, lives for drawing ferocious monsters, evil demons, zombies with melting faces, and vampire werewolves, but he also manages to deliver instantly iconic designs for characters like the Raven Queen, and he lights up every fight scene with Rogue Sun's glorious flames. There is just so much neat stuff going on in this comic, like how all the foes that Dylan defeats are locked up in magic diamonds, which are then hidden in plain sight inside of a jewelry shop. I'm also just a huge sucker for superheroes with legacies that span centuries, so getting to see multiple iterations of the hero, each with their own special weapons and designs, is sheer delight. Oh, and there's a fantastic issue that's a choose-your-own-adventure story, where Dylan gets stuck in a time loop, and the only way to defeat the bad guy is to break the comic's own logic by ignoring all the options and just turning the page anyway, making it a little puzzle that you, yes, you the reader, has to solve. If you're a longtime fan of the channel, then you know that I love scumbag heroes, and Dylan hits this trope to a T, because while yes, he's rough around the edges, you can see that spark of him being capable of becoming a better person. And over the course of the story, this past self gets burned away, and in its place is a bona fide hero. Rogue Sun isn't just a superhero comic, it's a story about legacy and how the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant. Your life does not have to be defined by your family, and all of us have the freedom to blaze our own trail. Now, let me make something extremely clear. Every comic in the Massiveverse is self-contained and it stands on its own. You do not need to read any other comic to understand what's going on in a given series. And instead of constantly shoving difficult to follow crossovers in your face, the writers just do one self-contained crossover issue a year, which they call Supermassive. One of the biggest factors in making this work is the fact that all the comics take place in totally different parts of the United States. It's not Marvel, where every important superhero lives in New York. Radiant Black Chicago feels completely different from Rogue Sun's New Orleans, and you never have that lingering feeling in the back of your head like you should be reading 3 other comics right now. You can enjoy the story as it is. Now, with all of that being said, although they're all connected, not every book in the Massiveverse takes place in the same reality. Take, for instance, the next comic that I would like to focus on, Inferno Girl Red. Its Earth is way more technologically advanced, which allows for a totally different tone and setting. This miniseries is written by Matt Groom, Kyle Higgins' co-writer on Ultraman, and the co-host of the Ranger Danger podcast. Yeah, if it isn't obvious by this point, Kyle brought everyone, and I mean everyone from his Power Ranger days, over to the Massiveverse. Inferno Girl Red is about a girl named Cassia who just started attending an elite high school that's smack dab in the middle of the bustling Apex City. But just as the school year starts, an evil cult rips the entire city out of existence and strands it in a mysterious dark dimension, unleashing an army of demons on the citizens in the process. In the middle of all this chaos, Cassia gets chosen by a magical dragon bracelet, making her the newest incarnation of Apex City's protector, Inferno Girl Red. Out of all the comics featured in this video, Inferno Girl Red feels the most like an action cartoon from the peak era of Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. Cassia is dealing with teenage high school drama and learning how to fit into this elite school that's filled with prodigies, all while balancing her newfound alter ego. And as someone who grew up on shows like Static Shock, Ben 10, and Danny Phantom, this comic has a lot of appeal for me. In fact, Matt Groom was specifically looking to channel a sort of youthful energy that is noticeably lacking in mainstream superhero comics these days.
There's so much vitality to the superhero genre left. and so much expressiveness that maybe is a little underserved in comics, and like I want that youthful energy to come through. I was in a Facebook group for my local comic book store down here in Australia, and someone was asking for recommendations for her 12-year-old niece, I think it was, of good places to start in comics, because she'd been watching the Marvel movies and kind of wants to make the transition. And I got a little stuck on the question. DC was doing these incredible one-off graphic novels aimed at younger readers, but they're all done in one. Like, if you love the story, that was kind of it. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, there needs to be something that is like a great superhero series that feels young and modern and vibrant, that is just like number 1, number 2, number 3, very easy to read through.
The art by Erica Durso is kinetic and perfectly captures how Inferno Girl Red is the fastest of the Massiverse characters. She's constantly dashing, flying, and firing off dragon-shaped energy blasts, all of which get amped up when Cassia enters her supercharged blazing mode. And man, I absolutely love Apex City. One of the reasons why I love DC Comics so much is because their locations like Gotham and Metropolis end up feeling like their own characters in the story, and Apex hits me in the exact same way. Plus, it's kind of like my dream city, perfectly blending nature and technology. I want to go to this library so damn bad. It feels a little bit weird to say, but my biggest complaint about this book is that because in my opinion the main antagonist design is a little bit plain, I actually wish that we got to see more of the rank and file demons that are attacking Apex. Their designs remind me a lot of the Grimm from Ruby, and they just look sick as hell. I want more of the generic bad guys, come on. Admittedly, there is not much to talk about here because at the time of this recording, only 3 issues of the series are out, but the next 3 are about to drop very soon. And having already read the advanced copies, let me tell you, this book only gets better. But okay, if you're looking for something a bit more grounded after all of that high-octane tokusatsu action, the Massiverse still has you covered, because before Radiant Black was even a twinkle in Kyle Higgins' eye, he teamed up with Alex Siegel to write a hard-boiled noir piece called C.O.W.L, which has since been retroactively added to the lore of the Massiverse. In the wake of World War II, the superheroes and vigilantes of Chicago unionized to create the Chicago Organized Workers League, working together to take down a group of supervillains called the Chicago Six. A couple of decades later, following the death of the final member of the Six, the city of Chicago was on the verge of canceling their contract with C.O.W.L, leading to its members being unsure of what to do next. But when an investigator finds classified documents inside of the late villain's safe house, which contains blueprints of C.O.W.L designed weapons and technologies, major questions are raised. How did a villain get his hands on these? And how deep does the union's corruption go?
The thing that we always talked about as we were building the book was that we really wanted to explore the corruption and degradation of American institutions in that way. And that at a certain point, an organization or an institution gets to a certain scale where self-preservation does become more important than perhaps the ideology that the organization was started in the spirit of or because of. And I think that is just a quintessentially American downfall. And we see it all the time. We're seeing it right now in our world. C.O.W.L was kind of the beginnings of that for us, but again, through the 1960s lens. And the corruption of an American institution.
Rod Rice brings a washed-out, painted look to the series that perfectly depicts the book's noir atmosphere, especially with how his style sets it apart from the mainstream superhero aesthetic. A perfect example would be how the comic handles Doppler. Yeah, remember her, the sound lady from Radiant Black with the cool triangle attack? Well, C.O.W.L features a previous incarnation of the character, and the way that his sound powers are depicted are even cooler, because he's able to interact with the pages of the comic itself. He rips a D out of a guy's word balloon to use as a weapon, and when this woman is chasing after him, Doppler is able to manipulate the onomatopoeias of her clacking heels to trip her. This is the kind of stuff that you can only get from comic books. It's so damn cool. Now, for as much as I would love to get into the nitty-gritty of C.O.W.L and its sequel, they are best experienced with as little context as possible, so you can enjoy all the twists and turns along the way like any other good mystery story. What I can say, though, is that if a gritty period piece that depicts a realistic take on the consequences and politics of superheroics in a vein that's similar to Watchmen, if that sounds like it's up your alley, then give it a read. You're going to enjoy this. But sticking to grounded mysteries, there's No One, written by Kyle Higgins and Brian Buccellato. This is a political political thriller where a mysterious hacktivist has been doxing corrupt people all across Pittsburgh under the alias of No One. But although this vigilante believes in the police system and wants his targets to be brought to justice the quote-unquote right way, a serial killer has taken their lives into his own hands and is murdering No One's targets one by one. Something that stands out to me, though, is that even though No One wants his targets to be captured and processed through the criminal justice system, he has an ironic catchphrase that elevates himself above the law.
No one is above the law, and I am no one.
That voice clip is a piece of what sets No One apart from other books, because it is not just a comic, it is a full-on multimedia experiment, as it has an in-universe true crime podcast that covers the event of the comic and adds to the narrative. The show notes of the podcast even link to in-universe news articles and a terminal website where you can access No One's data drops as if you were an actual citizen in this universe. If the entire thing seems like an ARG, that's because Higgins has a lot of experience with them.
I have to be careful what I say, because there's NDAs, but I ran an ARG.
Did
on
you?
a very, very prominent one that I can't ever publicly acknowledge.
Okay,
So yes,
noted.
yeah, I love ARGs. Definitely an influence on No One.
Now, I'll be the first one to admit that I wasn't sold on the story when I read the first issue, but that's because the comic is just a piece of the full puzzle, and the podcast makes it a complete product. Like, there's conversations that are referenced in the comic that are from the podcast and are not actually shown in the book. And although the comic and the podcast do stand on their own, and you don't have to go through all the in-universe websites and articles, they do make the story better. It might shock you, but consuming this entire thing as intended is actually the best way to experience it. Who would have thought? What's funny though is that even though this is comic Drake, I actually like the No One podcast a lot more than the comic, because it is extremely well acted, with well-known performers like Rachel Lee Cook, Patton Oswalt, and Yuri Lowenthal.
What brings a person to the point of building an anonymous digital persona to try and incite justice against those who have used their power to abuse the system?
And when that goes sideways, what brings them to put on a costume and turn vigilante, seemingly, based on their own statement, in an attempt to make amends for the unintended consequences? Which is, in this case, multiple murders and murderers.
And look, I'm not going to pretend like it's not tedious to read an issue, then listen to an episode of the podcast, back and forth. But if you're willing to put in the work to take it all in, then it is a fascinating and worthwhile experience. Probably not one that I would have stuck with to the end though if I wasn't making this video. But what's interesting to me is that although the comic is literally called No One, the titular vigilante doesn't make all that many appearances, with the series mostly focusing on media talking heads and a former policeman who's clearly a reworking from the original pitch, where this series was about Commissioner Gordon and his serial killer son.
It was a pitch called Gordon and Son, and it was like Hannibal in Gotham City with Commissioner Gordon and his serial killer son, James Jr., solving cold case murders together. But these are murders that Gordon actually thinks James Jr. committed early on in his career.
But after developing the series into an original work, they wanted to see how the comic book medium could be used to explore the idea of living in a world with vigilantes.
Part of the dynamic that was most interesting to Brian Buccellato and myself when we started building this, which was like, imagine having, Batman in your universe, but no one knows his identity, not even the readers. And that felt like a really compelling way to do our version of an urban vigilante.
And yeah, I'm not diving as much into the actual plot of the series because just like C.O.W.L, it's a mystery that you're going to want to go into blind. And on top of that, the story is culminating in a feature film in the style of a true crime documentary. So some of y'all are probably going to want to experience the story that way. But if this multimedia experience sounds like something that you would want to dive into, or you like ARGs, then definitely go ahead and give this a shot. Last but certainly not least is The Dead Lucky, written by Melissa Flores, who was heavily involved involved in every aspect of the Power Rangers franchise, from the TV shows, to the movie, to the comics, to the video games, and so much more. If it's modern day Power Rangers, then she was probably involved in some capacity. The Dead Lucky focuses on Bibiana Lopez Yang, a former soldier who returns to her home of San Francisco, only to find that it's been changed by corporate militarization. A tech company called Morrow landed a contract with the mayor to test out their futuristic cybertech, implementing it into every facet of life in the city, including peacekeeper robots. However, a gang was formed in order to push the company out of San Fran, leading to violent fights all across town. But Bibi isn't your average veteran. She is the sole survivor of an elite Black Ops platoon that was transporting classified cargo that exploded, granting her electric powers and the haunting presence of her fallen comrades' ghosts, which she uses to become a vigilante called the Dead Lucky. Oh, and she also has a mech suit that's cobbled together from Morrow's scrap, which can be autopiloted by the electric ghosts. Bibiana's quest to keep the peace in a city that she no longer recognizes is a way for her to tackle her PTSD and survivor's guilt, because Bibi's military background isn't just there to explain why she's physically fit enough to be a superhero. Her entire character is informed by her trauma, with real emotion bubbling beneath the surface of her stoic hard-ass demeanor, even if she's not the best at showing it.
The survivor's remorse and the survivor's guilt and the trauma that Bibi experiences is real. It exists in people. Like, they're just expected to come back and act like nothing's changed. We take these young kids, you know, I was like 18-year-olds, 19, 20-year-olds. We put them in situations where they're forced to either do or experience or see incredibly traumatic things, and then don't really give them a way to come out of that safely. Then they come back, and they're just expected to reintegrate and to act like they're okay and that they haven't changed because of that experience. And so you see them kind of living this mask.
On the complete opposite end of the tonal spectrum, though, The Dead Lucky is a very horny book. It's not explicit and would never make it into one of my spicy comic videos, but everybody in this book is caught up in a tangled web of romantic relationships, both past and present. The constant flirting is not going to appeal to everybody, but as someone who has spent years compiling an exhaustive list of hookups in the Marvel Universe, this messy drama is right up my alley. The art by French Carlemongo is super unique, as it incorporates Bibiana's Mexican and Chinese heritage. Like, there's dream sequences that feature Mexican calaveras and traditional Chinese dragons. And hell, Bibi's dual heritage is made explicitly clear by her parents running a Mexican-Chinese fusion restaurant, so you'll see a Dia de los Muertos Catherine right next to a Lucky Cat. But get this, the end of each issue straight up includes a recipe of a menu item from that restaurant. And luckily, my wife is a Mexican native and a hell of a cook, so she can help bring them to life. Making her debut on the channel, it's my wife, Kat.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for helping with this. I am going to be attempting to make wok fried carnitas.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, you know, very traditional. I've already been marinating this pork shoulder for a while. This has Chinese 5-spice, oyster sauce, soy sauce, etc. Ginger. And then it's going to be coated in this chili honey glaze.
Oh, that sounds good.
There's not much to it. I just kind of put it in the wok, spin it around a little bit, but you're here to make sure that I don't screw it up.
Is that why you chose this recipe?
Yeah, it's easy enough. Allow me to walk this way. Shit. Kind of need the walk for that. All I really do is just pour this in, do this for 6 minutes. I wish I could do like the cool whoosh whoosh tricks, you know.
No.
Looking like Food Wars.
Jesus. I'm glad you're wearing an apron.
Thank you.
First of all, because you're clumsy as hell.
Okay, rude.
And secondly, because I can call you Mandilon.
Mandilon?
Yes.
Are you calling me a sim?
Indeed.
Hey man, that's the way of the house husband, baby. That's how you gotta do. Anytime that like I give you a trade or a manga, you're like, that's nice. I'm gonna go back to reading my manga.
Yeah. No, I read the one, the Panther Lady one.
The Panther Lady?
The redhead.
Hellcat.
Yes.
Hellcat.
That one. That one was good. It was
good.
Fun.
I think I made you read Doctor Strange, right? The Oath.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
You did. That is exactly what we want. That is the caramelizing that the recipe was referring to. So we just need to make sure that at least 2 sides of the meat look like that to make sure that it's fully cooked.
All right, throwing on the glaze. And then we're just gonna toss and coat that. And then that's basically it, right?
Yeah.
I hope to God people are entertained by this. They said to garnish with sesame seeds and green onions. This is a trick that I learned on TikTok, is that you just take the kitchen scissors and cut the green onions.
And send them flying everywhere.
Yep, and there we go. This is it. We definitely could have cut these into smaller chunks, but these are just what we got right from the Candicidia. Okay, bone apple tea.
Interesting.
What?
It does taste like mole.
Does it?
When you try just the rice
Hang on,
with the
okay.
glaze.
It tastes like mole? Mm-hmm. I guess. And then again, I think you've had way more mole than I've ever had.
Yeah,
So,
no, for sure. That's my favorite dish.
Yeah.
No, right now.
no, come on, this is my one job. Another one. Another one. Another one.
Stop.
That's the only thing DJ Khaled and I have in common.
Jesus.
That's not going in the final cut. Because your mom's watching. Hang on. That actually, that looks great.
Definitely would add spice
Sure.
to it. Like, make it spicy.
Yeah, okay.
It goes as a taco.
I do agree that it feels like it's missing just a little something else to really bring it to the next level, but that's solid. Thanks for helping me. Love you.
I love you.
Gross PDA. Overall, The Dead Lucky is a welcome change of pace to the Massiverse, and it succinctly tells its story over the course of 12 issues. And honestly, I am really excited to see what's next for the character. Now, I get that I've been glazing the Massiverse for this entire video, but if I can be real for a minute, I genuinely worry that these comics could implode. See, at the end of one of the supermassive crossovers, Medieval Spawn shows up, and instead of being hyped for this, a pit formed in my stomach. When the founders of Image Comics left Marvel and DC in the 90s to start their own company, they tried out the whole shared universe thing, but because of scheduling delays, personal conflicts, and a lot of drama, the entire project fell apart, and all of the comics became solo projects, which really sucks because the shared world building got destroyed when writers left and took their own properties with them. And as a result, serious retcons were needed, and the continuity became an absolute mess. Spawn is by far the biggest example, with his origin being heavily intertwined with Chapel, a character from Rob Liefeld's Youngblood series. But when Liefeld left, Chapel's role needed to be entirely replaced with a brand new character, Jessica Priest. Not to mention that there was an entire string of lawsuits around Angela and Medieval Spawn, the very character that appeared in Supermassive, which you can learn all about in my award-winning video on the subject. Right now, all of the Massive books do stand on their own, but if the creators end up tying them together too much, there's not much to stop any of these creators from taking their IP away and not letting anyone else use them. But Kyle, who's been acting as the sort of executive producer on all of this, says that's not really a concern.
These books are all owned by their respective creative teams, but no one's doing anything in a vacuum. And I would say the best part about supporting and enabling your friends and people that you believe in as creators is that when you find the right people, they give that back, tenfold. And so everyone who does a book with us in our line here is on the same page about what we're trying to do, the types of books we're trying to make, how we're trying to push the boundaries of the medium, as well as how much we are all better together.
It's just that when I specifically see Spawn show up, I worry about what's to come. I sincerely hope that nobody gets too big for their britches and none of the creators spread themselves too thin between the Massiverse and their other creative projects. In the meantime though, I'm just glad that this experiment has been an all-you-can-eat buffet of truly spectacular comics. And if you want to give them a shot, then I highly recommend picking up this book, Across the Massiverse, which contains the first issue for each of the major series all in one place for an affordable price. Otherwise, feel free to pick them up directly from the Massiverse website, your local comic shop, or read them digitally on a platform like GlobalComix. This video has been massive.
And you know what else is massive?
My desire for you to like and subscribe. Seriously, thank you for sticking through to the end. I hope you learned at least a little something new, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.